Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Dana Bickford, and I've been on a few of these calls with y'all. Doug had asked me a little over a week ago to put together a program for you all, and to do it with Dick Hendy. And Dick and I spoke, but Dick is not feeling well today, so he's not going to be joining us. I've sort of combined a few of his ideas with those of my own, and we'll have a visit this afternoon that will cover a number of different things. One of the most important things that Dick and I see, Dick and I are mostly involved in the ACE program, which is the final acquirer program that comes into effect about a month before an acquisition is made by an entrepreneur, if they've selected the ACE program. And we generally get involved about a month before, get everybody ready for day one, and then come in and meet the entrepreneur at the company the day they are introduced. We help conduct interviews and essentially guide the entrepreneur through weekly virtual meetings and conduct a workshop about 45 to 60 days after the closing. Most of what Dick does is financial related guidance, excuse me, and I sort of coordinate the efforts of Dick on the financial side. I coordinate the efforts of a marketing group on the marketing and sales side, and also a P&C group on the P&C side. So based on some of those commitments we've made, we've developed a few things that probably make sense to make sure you're thinking of before you actually close. And I've also got some thoughts to share with you on the pre-close due diligence side. A number of those I think you've probably already heard, but they bear repeating. So, and if you have any questions along the way, just stop me, and this will be hopefully as participative as you want it to be. With regard to the search, I know a number of you are in a search. And these are just a few of the things, some of which maybe all you've heard of, but I do intend to repeat them. The first thing is don't fall in love with the deal you're looking at, and don't check your brain at the door when you're talking to the broker or talking to the seller. You need to be on all the time. We talk a lot about forming a relationship with the seller. That's really important. It's also important to form a relationship many times with the broker, but you really need to, have the antenna up. Another thing that we talk about, everybody hears this, but a QOE, quality of earnings report, is critically important, and it will give you great information about the company before you close, when you can do something about it. There are a few diligence topics that we talk about, some more than others, and one of which is if you're going into a company, or if you're about to buy a company that's a construction-related firm or does projects, make sure you start getting jobs in progress reports, and I'd recommend getting them every other week, starting about a month before the closing, and make sure that final one is really important, and that should come right before closing. It'll give you a real good idea as to how the jobs flow and how the company's billing flows and payments, and where they are in terms of the work on the project. And so you'll be able to tell if they're 40% through the project, but they billed 60% of the project, then that will impact the way you look at your working capital financing and on your final closing agreement with the seller. So that's just one way you can use that. But it's really an important thing. And I don't know that it always gets the emphasis it should, but if you're going into a company with big projects, then you definitely want to get jobs in progress reports and study them, make sure you understand what's on them, and what it means. There's also, we talk, I know with some of you that I've visited with in your onboarding calls, we talk about working capital planning, and it's generally on those calls, and on some of these calls, they're a little bit, they can be a little bit generic. There are a couple of AP calls in the library, so make sure that you have watched those and understand them. And if you don't have a link to them or haven't seen them, send me an email and I'll just forward you a link to them. It's really, really important. We've seen people get into companies and it's not unusual. In fact, it's unusual when revenues don't drop a little bit, and sometimes significantly after close. And when that happens, you need to have planned for working capital contingencies. So I just want to make sure that nobody forgets that. That's really important. There are some questions. I've seen a few confidential information memorandums, and I've seen folks who have requested financial statements and they get an income statement. And I know not everybody is a financial executive coming in to do this sort of buy their own business exercise. And an income statement is important, but it is by far not the most important thing you want to see. It is important, but you also want to get balance sheets and statements of cash flow. Those are critical, and they all need to be read together and understood together. And the cash, when I first look at, and I'm a former banker, when I first look at financial statements for a company, first thing I look at is that cash flow statement. And when you look at that, you can kind of see operationally what's happened. You can see financially what's happened, and you can see what investment decisions they've made, and how that's all impacted the company's cash. And at the end of the day, cash is king for the company, especially in the first few months after you've bought that firm. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows what you're looking for on financials when you ask for them. That's to get you started. Then you're going to dig in and you're going to start asking questions like, what does this line of business look like from an income standpoint and expense standpoint? And what does that line of business, and how have they been growing over the last 3 or 4 years? Those sorts of questions will give you lots of information that you can use to help you tweak the profitability after you get in there. But just to understand what those lines of businesses are doing, a lot of these small businesses can't do that for you. And so if you don't have it before you get in there, somebody like Dick Hendy can really help you figure out what you've got in terms of profitability and growth in each of the lines of business within a company. This is the following one is I think it's an important question, and it's not one you're going to think about. You probably won't see it, but most of you are coming out of top schools, great employers, looking to do something different, control your own destiny, build some wealth, that sort of thing. You're going to be in a lot of the businesses that we deal with are blue collar businesses. It's a completely different set of employees than what you might be used to. And one of the questions that's really important that you ask before you close, somewhere in the due diligence, and I wouldn't recommend you do it right away, and it probably wouldn't ever be a killer, but it's something you need to know about, and that is, are there any employees in the company that have a criminal history? And what does that look like? And where are they assigned in the company? And what does the seller know? That's pretty important. And I can give you an example. If you're employing a plumber, or if you're buying a plumbing shop and you've got plumbers going into people's houses, you don't want to have somebody that's got a violent record. They may have had a drug conviction or something like that. May not be a problem, but a violent offender could well be an employee of the company, and maybe there's only one or two people that know about it. So you want to just ask and make sure you know what you've got to deal with. We had one, and it was very interesting, and the entrepreneur made a great decision. It was a key employee who had a very serious criminal conviction, had served time, but this individual was the individual that satisfied the most complex jobs that company got. He was the only one that could do that. So he was very important to the company. He could handle $500,000 very complex situations, and yet because only utilized in commercial entities where there were other, there were a lot of contractors around, it wasn't anywhere near as serious a problem as it would have been had he been going into people's homes. So I would just ask and make sure you know what you've got before you get in there. Better to find that out beforehand and have a plan for it than find it out after the fact and not know what to do with it. Couple other questions to ask, whether there are any IRS issues or lawsuits. I think you all know that in all likelihood. And just a couple other things. If something that you're looking at doesn't make sense to you, dig in. I would dig in with the broker or with the seller, figure out why this information doesn't make sense to you, and utilize Slack and your contemporaries here, other entrepreneurs, because they will help. And that's one of the powerful parts of the Acquire business model, is that you all have access to each other through Slack. If you don't use each other for your mutual education, you're making a mistake. So when somebody asks you for help, by all means pitch in and give them a hand, because somebody can and will do that for you as well. Are there any questions?
Yes, Dana, I do have a question for you. Have you worked on any like district with TIFs in real estate?
Repeat the question again.
Have you worked on in real estate deals where you take over like a core of a project or a district and using TIF tax incentives for mezzanine finance and senior debt? Have you done that type of work before?
No, I have not, Mark. I've not done that.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
We may have others, and I may have taken apart things like that in a different life, but that would probably not be pertinent here. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure. Sorry, I wish I could be more help on that.
Yeah, it's no problem. Definitely, I understand what you said. I was just talking to a friend yesterday. I'm back here in Arizona, but I was in Detroit, Michigan, and my buddy had to get rid of two of his best mechanics because one of them stole $10,000 from him on a job, and he had to have him actually arrested by a detective. And it was a father and son that was there, and he had to get rid of both of them. So, yeah, I totally got what you say. Check the backgrounds. He usually uses a skip tracer to check some of the backgrounds out too. What do you prefer to use to check the backgrounds out?
I have, fortunately, I have not been in that kind of a issue here, or in that kind of a situation myself, but I would ask the seller right up front. The seller typically will know.
Okay.
And if you were to find out that they didn't disclose something like that, I think they would have some liability. But you can do background checks. In the past, I've hired a private investigator. You'll have the social security number of the individual once you get in there. If you have any kinds of issues, I've done that in the past. It wasn't all that expensive, and it definitely told me what I needed to know. When you do that, get prepared. You're going to learn more than what you wanted to know. But it's really an important thing. I think that you hit on two things. Where I hit on one, you hit on the other. Financial. If there are financial crimes involved, you really have to ask yourself, can this hurt us? What is the role of that individual? What do they have access to? And or our clients. And then the other is, can they be harmful to our clients physically or in some other way? So those are all judgment calls. There isn't a prescribed solution, and it's I'd err on the side of conservatism. But I personally believe in second chances as well, and it's just a matter of you need to interview that individual before you make a decision, unless it's so clear cut that you don't need to have that interview. You know what you've got to do. Then you just get it done and get it over with, and don't delay.
Yeah, this happened. Yeah, I owned a clothing boutique and had the same thing. Even had women that had children, and didn't have babysitters and couldn't make it work one time as well. So I'm an entrepreneur, and I totally understand that. And it was this happened just recently because my buddy just hired these guys in a couple of months ago, and they were doing great, father and son team in this mechanic shop. He's been running it probably for 30 something years, and it's doing terrific. And he had to fire two people. One person who had been there with him for 20 years from the beginning had stole over $30,000 to $50,000 from him over a time period. The other two, he went to the hospital back in January and had to have back surgery because he's been grinding his back out so long being a mechanic and a tow truck driver. And this father and son stole over $10,000 from him after he went in the hospital for surgery. And so luckily the woman had receipts and he had cameras, and the police did an investigation, and they arrested the two guys. But these were two guys that knocked out all of his work. He never had cars in the shop. I went in to see him Saturday, and his whole shop was completely packed. He had probably about 15 cars that he had to take care of by himself. So he wanted me as a business partner before, and I was going to actually get in with his business, but come to find out that his tax attorney that he had, or accountant, hadn't filed his business taxes for 2 years after he had paid $7,800 for them too. So he just had to watch credit card merchants, the accountants, and everything that was going on in his business. So I've been learning some lessons from him that hasn't been from my personal experience, but being able to live through his mistakes that he's taught me. So it's really good to know that, and for people to be aware of those things as well on the call.
You bet. Always better to learn from somebody else's mistake. And I've learned that way too. My own.
Right. That's the best way.
So let's move on. Being the lead integrator on the ACE program, I've seen some things from a lot of entrepreneurs, and these are some issues that I see a lot of, and I thought I'd try and distill it into a few quick thoughts to share, I guess the best way. So many of you all, in fact, most of the individuals in Acquire that are acquiring companies have been in some absolutely great companies, great reputations, and some have had just terrific experience and lots of variety of experiences as well. What defines that, though, is you go from a role where you have a certain role. That's what you do, and it's defined. And you're going from that role to a very, very different one where you not only are beyond that role, but you have responsibility for every role in the company, and that requires a much different mindset, and it can be exhausting until you get used to it, and even then it can be exhausting. But I would say that everybody that I've met has far in excess the intellectual capacity to do it. It's a matter of, is this for me? And I'll give you some. Let me give you some examples or some categories. First of all, what we most like to talk about, or at least my observation, is what a lot of people just really like to talk about is, what's my strategy for this company? As soon as you start looking at an information memorandum, you start thinking about the opportunity, and you go through in your mind, what are these people doing? What could they be doing better? What could I do with this? How could I change it? That sort of thing. The strategic issues are all important. You kind of go through the who, what, when, where, and why. And that helps you think long term. But when you get into that company, you're going to get overwhelmed, or it's easy. I won't say you're going to, I would say it's easy, if you don't have a plan, to get overwhelmed by the sheer volume of all different kinds of things that hit you. And so the strategic things I want to set aside for right now. We know that that's coming. You're going to want to think about that as you get your hands around this company. You start learning how things have been done, what's been done well, what hasn't been done well. You start seeing things that you want to change. You start knowing how to deal with each of the individuals in your company, all of that. They are now your employees, whereas in a big company, they were employees of the company. And they might have been reporting to you, or maybe not. But here, they're your employees. It's your decision to keep them employed. The first thing that you'll notice is that there are going to be a slew of operational issues that, if you're not careful, they could really get to you. And the question is how you deal with that. I bet you within the first, if you were to buy the company today, and I was to meet you out there tomorrow, I would have you ready to talk to the employees. You basically know what you're going to say, and you're going to be yourself. And I'm going to give you some advice on what to say, how to say it. But frankly, I want you to be yourself, and I want those employees to see you being yourself. And then within 3 hours, we're going to be interviewing people. We'll have already interviewed at least 2, maybe 3 people within the first 3 hours, maybe 4. And you're going to know about 12 things that you just have. We're going to be taking notes. What are the things that need to be addressed, and how do we prioritize them, and all that sort of thing. So how do you deal with that? And the best answer to that, in my opinion, is you want to identify key people. You need to, and we're going to start those interviews that first day. That's the purpose, is we're going to identify key people, their skills, their attitudes, and how much you can entrust them with. And so what you want to be able to do very quickly, if it's at all possible, is to empower key individuals to make those decisions for you. You might be willing to make them, you might be able to make them, but you also might be making key decisions in a vacuum, whereas the employees that are there have the background information on the customer, the situation, whatever it is, the vendor, and they will be able to advise you. So you want to listen to what your employees say. But as we interview those folks, you'll come away in that first day knowing with a pretty high level of certainty who you can count on, or you'll know you really can't count on anybody there. They're not ready. So to the extent that you can, you want to start building that leadership, identifying and building that leadership team quickly. And I would tell you that you can empower people to make certain kinds of decisions, and You may empower somebody to make a decision based on what you think after interviewing somebody, and they make a mistake. And virtually any mistake they make is not going to kill the company, but you're going to learn from it if they do. And you'll also learn from it if they don't. So there's a lot of learning right there. But if you want to make every decision that is presented to you, um, the chances are you're not going to be able to step into the shoes of the seller. And most of these boomers that own these companies, they have been making all decisions. Their employees are the ones that carry out the decisions, and they're not necessarily, they may be ready, but they have not necessarily been counted on to make decisions by the seller. So that is a very common thing to encounter when you come into these businesses. The business that you buy, many of these sellers are control freaks, and that's why one of the reasons they're selling. They're burned out because they just have to make every single decision, and they're not counting on their employees. We advise, as you know, get your employees empowered and oversee them, but give them the reins as well, and make sure you're communicating with them so they know the direction and they know what they can decide without asking your permission for every single thing they do. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. There are also financial issues that are going to start happening pretty quickly. You'll close. You will have done some planning for your working capital needs after the closing. Hopefully we'll have enough financing set aside to handle those working capital needs. But there are times when this, in going back to the sellers, they know their business pretty well, and many of them pump that business up pretty well right before the close. And then within 2 to 3 months, you start seeing sales dwindle away. There may not be a sales funnel at all, and so you need to be focused on that. But the bottom line to it is that in planning for the acquisition, you definitely need to have a plan for hopefully a working capital line of credit that will carry you as your payment of your vendors and any delayed payments from your customers work against you for a while. So that is a very much a key issue to be focused on and be aware of before you close and after the close. Any questions on that? Again, I would refer you to the working capital AP calls that are in the library of AP call videos.
I do have a question for you, Dan. Have
Okay.
you ever seen someone fire like a whole slew of employees right before they sell the business in order to raise the capital in the business, not the capital, but the actual network of the company, which you were talking about?
Did you say fire employees?
Yes.
No, I haven't seen that.
Okay. I was just wondering about that because most of the time, a little bit bigger companies, they fire their employees in order to increase the revenue and to bring more profit into the companies. Like, first thing they do is cut right into the employees.
Larger companies have been known to make short-term employment decisions like that, where they will cut a chunk of the workforce to make their cost structure look better. You can kind of figure that out if you're looking at it and they've got decent financial statements. And a lot of times, if you interview, if you go in for a plant tour or something like that, if you listen real well, the employees will kind of tell you that they're running pretty thin. You can ask strategic questions, and you'd be surprised what people will tell you. So you need to certainly be aware of that. You may see that on a list that the broker put together 2 months ahead of time,
Sure.
where they had 27 employees and now they've got 20.
Right.
What's the reason for that? That's a good question. What happened? So there are those. There's a lot of, you start seeing those are like, I don't know whether that would be a red flag, but it could be if there were a bunch of other little flags out there that you're looking at.
Okay. Or
Okay.
if it was temporary employees too, because they might have fired temporary hires too, right?
Yeah, it's possible. They also could have had a project that they didn't want to bring people on and then have to fire them, so they brought in temp employees. It's
Sure.
really sort of I haven't seen that on businesses this size.
Okay.
Normally, you'll see them stretch. People will work extra hours, work extra hard, work on weekends, that sort of thing, to
Right.
get through a specific project that is taxing.
Okay.
And you'll also see that they will stretch out that project longer than what they originally thought it would take,
Exactly.
just simply because it requires more hours.
Right.
The third thing I would mention is when you get in there, you can't do much on the financial end if you don't have a marketing and sales funnel bringing revenue in. And a lot of these companies, the seller is the primary breadwinner. That person is going out, they've got relationships with their big customers they're doing repeat business with. They may be doing all the quoting, all the bidding. And some companies, the bidding is easy. Some companies, it's much more challenging. In a case, say, of an electrician, it could be dangerous. If you bid a job foolishly, you not only could lose money, but you could hurt somebody badly with an electrician. So you really need to understand who's doing that bidding, have a plan for being able to continue it. Don't necessarily assume that every person that's got their resume out there as somebody that can do the bidding for you, don't necessarily assume that they can do it right. And be very careful how you set up their reward structure, because if you reward them incorrectly, they'll be rewarded to bring in all the business in the world at below cost, and they will do it. It's really an area that you need to understand, that you need to dig in, and to the extent that you've got somebody in the company that you begin to develop trust with, that understands the business, they can be very, very helpful to you in putting putting that bidding assignment on the right person. I've worked with somebody that did an absolutely outstanding job on that and found the right person fairly quickly, but it could have just as easily gone in the other direction. And I would not, it's very common for somebody, a new entrepreneur in a company, to go out to a recruiter and ask them to I want you to find a bidder that looks like this. And you get 10 resumes or 3 resumes or whatever it is. Just because the recruiter says this person is great and that the resume says that they are great, don't necessarily presume that that's the case. So make sure you really dig into that. That's where your lifeblood is where that business is coming in. And then finally, the P&C person, you don't want, as an entrepreneur, you don't want to be the one dealing with all the the personnel and human issues that company's got going on. You need to be focused on your company. You need to not be employed in it to the extent that you can avoid that. So if, as you plan your acquisition and as you think about it, depending on the number of employees you have and what you're thinking about in terms of reward structures and tying people to the company, you probably want to get a P&C person in there fairly quickly. The argument against it is that person doesn't generate revenue. I mean, it's a good argument. The argument for it is if you want to be the one doing it, it's going to eat up a ton of your time. And so for a lot of you, if you haven't had HR responsibilities for your employees before, other than 2 or 3, it can be a real time consumer for you. Okay. Any questions on any of those subject areas? We good? Okay. Next is I'd say, finding the right balance with your new role. And your new role, the balance is going to feel very strange to you if you haven't done this before. If you've done it before, then I'm probably not talking to you. You know that you're going to get into the situation where you are the one that everybody's going to look at or look to for decisions on things, because frankly, many of them aren't accustomed to making decisions. So they want somebody to tell them what to do because that's what their boss, the owner, has done with them for the last 10 years. That's not exactly how you want to run the company, because you'd like to be able to grow it. So the risk and the uncertainty in this environment is going to be much different than what you've experienced before. The uncertainty is having to make decisions without the best information possible, without having everything you need. You're going to have to learn to trust your gut, and do everything you can to pull together the information you need. Go to the people you think have it in the company, but you're going to, in most cases, it's better to make a decision than to let something sit. In a small company, if you let it sit, it will fester and it will get worse quickly. So your willingness to take risk has to be a little higher than what it was in a major corporation, where much of the information, I won't say it's perfect, but it's there, and you generally learn to count on it. In these kinds of situations, as an entrepreneur with a small company with 15 employees and 5 major vendors and that sort of thing, there's going to be information they just don't have, and you'll need to talk to your employees and figure out what the true answer is and be able to give them a decision and make it. And I would highly encourage you to listen to those folks. It's better to, in my opinion, it's better to go with the advice you're getting if you trust your employees, at least to tell you the truth, from their experience of being in the company for the last 5 years. It's better to trust them. And then as you get to learn more about the company, you may choose to go in a different direction on similar decisions. But my advice would be willing to take that risk. Your confidence in doing that, you're on a tightrope, and you don't want to be so confident that it appears as arrogance to a blue collar employee. And on the other hand, you don't want to be a shrinking violet either. You don't want to be afraid to make a decision because, gee, I just don't have the right information. You can do that sometimes, but if it's a habit and if it's a pattern, you're going to have to learn to ask the right questions, get the right information, see what you did last time, and make the call. And they will have a lot more respect for you if you make the call and you happen to be wrong. You took their information, you made the call based on the information they gave you, you used your own judgment, you made the call, oh, it was wrong. Duly noted, move on. And they're going to have a lot more respect for you that you're willing to make that decision. And they will have a lot less respect if you just sit and don't make a decision because you're uncomfortable. You have to get ready to make some decisions. You're going to need to. Anybody have any comments about that? That's probably antithetical to a lot of folks, and it's a challenge, I realize. And when it's happening 5, 6, 8 times a day, it can wear you down. But just know that's the kind of environment you'll be going into initially. Questions, comments? Okay. Other things about confidence that will help. I would advise you to be visible to all of your employees. If they're out in the field, show up once in a while, and don't make it once every 2 months. Show up, let them know you care about what they're doing, and you'll be surprised at the response you'll get. It will be positive. You're going out to see what they're doing, how they're doing it, see what they need, ask them questions, ask them what questions they have for you. They will appreciate the fact that you're communicating with them. And it's important that you do that, and it's really a good habit to get into. I would also, especially for the first, definitely for the first month or two, listen to them. Don't dictate, just do be decisive, but listen to the employees, because they will tell you 9 times out of 10, they'll tell you what you need to know. And what you need to know may be negative. They may be telling you things that you absolutely don't agree with. Before you take action on it, just make sure that you're in a good position to take action, and you've got what you need to make that kind of a decision to go against what their practice has been. Couple other things, very simple. You've all heard it: praise in public, criticize in private. If you start criticizing in public, that will really destroy the culture of the company, or at the very least, it will make it very difficult for you to build a strong culture with your employees. And the final thing I'd just say is be personal and friendly, but you're not everyone's best friend, and there's a balance there. Any final comments, thoughts? Okay. See, I think we've got about 14, 15 minutes. I'll try to run through the last set here real quick, and then if there are any comments or any discussion, we can do that. These are more common mistakes that I've seen, and it involves the role of confidence, kind of what I was talking about a minute ago. And this is essentially post close, after the transaction's taken place. When it comes to the seller, most of the entrepreneurs, everyone sort of develops their own relationship with the seller. Sometimes it's strong, sometimes it's not. You all are very experienced. You all have developed relationships your entire lives. The seller is motivated to have you put a lot of money in their hands up front. And so the seller's never going to forget that, and don't you. After the fact, after the transaction, you may, in the process of going through the transaction, all of your due diligence, you may come to realize that the seller has played a very key role in the company. Absolutely. There are things that you need to prevent the seller from doing. You need to prevent the seller from interfering with your employees, and some will do it, and happens more often than you realize. They will come in and absolutely raise Cain with your employees about something they did. This is after the closing. This is 3 months later. You can't let them do that, and take them aside and tell them in no uncertain terms that is not to happen again. I don't want you coming in the company without me knowing about it, unless you've already made that arrangement and you have a great deal of confidence in that individual. If you see the seller is a hothead, the seller is unpredictable, then you need to keep that individual away from the employees. They're not They're not his or her employees anymore. They're yours. And they can create absolute havoc with your employees. And I've seen it too many times, not just with Acquira, but with other companies as well. There are, with regard to your confidence, it takes a lot of confidence to look at the seller and say, John, you can't do that anymore. I don't want you coming in here without my permission. You can't, you have to have that, you may have to have that conversation if they're unpredictable and behave badly, and you'll know it. Don't question your judgment if you feel that way. And if encourage your employees to tell you if they've got any problems with the seller. Encourage them. They work for you. And don't forget that. Some of them may have a challenge separating the seller from the company. And it's really, really important that you help them do that. And you don't have to be stern or anything like that. You can just say, look, you guys now work for me. I realize John over here, the seller, has been with you 10 years, but he sold the company. So if you have any troubles, just let me know and I'll take care of it. That will help them identify that you as the new leader. And that's definitely what you want, because I've seen too many cases where the seller will contradict things that the new owner has instructed the employees to do. And it's been very harmful to more than one company. With regard to building confidence, make sure you're listening to employees. I can give you a couple examples. One of our entrepreneurs found he was very fortunate in that the company was filled with absolutely strong people, but the seller wouldn't let him do anything and had people in the wrong roles. And so when this entrepreneur went in and we interviewed these employees, it was very clear the new general manager was on site. That was clear within 30 minutes. We knew that. We also knew that one of the low administrative people in the company was absolutely prepared to take on a significant financial role. She was great and had already a lot of knowledge, but had never been given the responsibility. And so that individual picked up a lot of balls and is much more satisfied now than she was before that. I think he's bought a lot of loyalty, not only with those two, but with a whole lot of other people that appreciated the fact that he was promoting people from within. Those weren't the only two. There were others. So if that is how you see it and you believe you've got the basis of a good relationship with some capable people, that's going to buy you loyalty, not just from them, but from their colleagues as well. When you get in there, this is kind of self-evident, I think, but it's not self-evident with everybody, but assume your employees know more about the business than you do. You've done a lot of due diligence. You've talked to brokers, you've talked to the seller. Half the time the seller only knows what they know about the business and the employees know more than the seller. So that's why it's so really important to listen to them, because they'll tell you what they think, and they'll also tell you the ideas that they put forth over the last 3 or 4 years that the seller just wouldn't even listen to, or just decided, no, we're not going to do that. Too much work. Don't want to do it. And so your very new employees may be just dying to get somebody that will listen to them, because they can add a revenue line on and they know how to do it. And they can tell you how to do it in probably 30 minutes or less. So that is a resource that hopefully you will find when you walk in, and that's an employee group that is open to somebody that will be open to them. I got some advice a while back from a friend. He was a CEO of a pretty big company, and he said, Dana, you might be the smartest person in the room when you go into this company, but don't let them know it. Keep it to yourself. If that's the way you approach these folks, they're going to love you, and they will. And I've never seen it happen any other way. So I would just tuck that one away. Keep it to yourself. You probably are. You will find some of these blue collar folks. Very few of them have a college education, which most of you do. But there are some really diamonds in the rough in these companies. And you'll find some very smart folks that don't have a college education. It wasn't in the cards for them for whatever reason, family circumstances, whatever it was. But they can be among your best employees. So you want to be looking for those types. Yeah, here's another one that I will comment on before I stop. The kind of people you deal with in the high tech world are not really, they're quite a bit different than what you deal with in the blue collar world. And I would just say, if I don't know if y'all remember the guy they called Joe the plumber in the press, who I think he challenged. I don't think it was Biden. I think he challenged Barack Obama when he was campaigning, I think. But it was it was an odd paradigm where you've got this highly educated guy and then talking to this plumber. It was kind of a funny setup. But that's the guy most of you will encounter, that person. Whether he's male or female doesn't make any difference. They'll be both. So just be aware of that it's a different personality type. And I would encourage you to be as accepting as you can possibly be. And as you treat them, the vast majority of them will also treat you if you are balanced when you come in and you listen and you solicit their advice and their guidance and their ideas and you actually listen. They're going to love you, and they're going to love the fact that many of them will love the fact that they don't have an owner that's screaming and yelling at them, and that happens. And so I would just leave it at that. If there are any comments or questions, I'd be more than happy to facilitate a discussion for the remaining few minutes. Well, if there's nothing else, I'll give you the rest of the afternoon.
Hey, I was actually curious if you've seen earlier you talked about criticism, and it's what I'm about to ask is not quite about criticism, about creating like a culture of transparency.
Yeah.
And so, there are people who they do one-on-ones with their employees,
Mhm.
but then there are another faction of people who maybe don't, and this is rare. This is like something that's like growing. They don't believe in one-on-one, so they just have, they have group meetings where everyone like talks about like what they're working on, and they get feedback publicly. And because that's happening across the board, what happens is you get transparency, and if you make a mistake, you just have to own up to your mistake. But that's a situation that's happening across for everyone, right? And so I was curious what your take is on that setup.
Yeah, you're talking about language. I think not meeting people where they are is foolish.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
it's the mark of a poor leader, in my opinion. People need to know you care about them, and it doesn't take long for you to show that. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I advise. I'm involved in something else, non-acquirer related, that brings me in contact with business leaders around North Texas here. And I advise them, get out of your office. Tell somebody to tell you to get out of your office and walk down to some part of the business you haven't been in the last 3 months, and just stop by somebody's desk or somebody's workstation or wherever they are working and just ask them how they're doing. Because if you do that, you're setting an example that you are approachable, that you are actually human, because if you stay in your office long enough, they'll wonder if you're human. And then they'll see a decision, and it's really easy for 12 people in that group meeting to start thinking that this guy's a jerk. So, that's my background was in the military. And if you're the CO of a unit and you're not talking to the people in your unit, you're crazy. And it just makes no sense for you to not talk to them. Yes, have group meetings whenever you need them. Don't overdo it. And there are some that you, at least initially, you may want to have scheduled with your leadership team. But I'm talking about everybody in that company needs to see you from time to time. I know a friend that has worked in a major company here, only 500 employees, okay? That friend has not seen their CEO in 9 years. 9. Now think about that. That's crazy to me. It doesn't take, if you do that 15 minutes twice a week, have your assistant or have somebody you trust say, I used to do this. I had 3 or 4 people that worked for me, and I'd tell them, if you haven't seen me, come down here and get my butt out of my chair and get me up to your just tell me to come up to your floor. And they would do it. And I'd go up there, and it's amazing the communications you'll have with your own employees. And I tell you what, it builds loyalty like you wouldn't believe. So that's worth what you're paying for it. I believe very strongly that you need to make a connection. Other than that, you're just a number. And if you're just a number to them, they think that they are just a number to you. That makes sense?
Yeah, fair enough.
It doesn't take long. 15 minutes twice. You're going to work late anyway. 15 minutes twice a week. You can talk to, if you've got a company with 25 employees, you can see every one of those once a week, pretty easy. Or at least once every other week or once every third week. You can see them. You don't have to overdo it, but they need to know that they can say, hey, Dana, how are you doing? And not feel like they're, stepping on my toes or your toes or anybody else's. They just, and you want to ask them, how are things going? What do you need? They'll tell you. If they think you're interested, they will tell you what they're working on, what's your obstacles, what do I need to clear away for you? If you do that, they're going to love you.
All right. Appreciate it.
Hey, Dana, I'd like to also add on to it as well. And thank you for your service too, brother. Do you feel like with throwing like pizza party for your employees and rewarding them gift cards for maybe like Target or somewhere where they do good and having an employee of the month, how do you feel about doing those things as incentives and getting to know the employees? Like you got 25 employees, you buy pizza for 25 employees to get to know them, or if there's employees good, you give them gift cards to Target, maybe even give out turkeys for their families when they do good on the holidays.
Yeah.
How do you feel about those sort of incentives?
Hey, it worked for Tiny Tim's family. It's that's a great idea. There are a ton of things like that you can do. If you make everything about money, it will be about money.
Right.
But building a culture isn't about money.
Right.
Building a culture is about building bonds. And you can build bonds between people that, are in really crappy situations, but you can build bonds between them. In fact, adversity begets brotherhood. If you're in things together, that begets a brotherhood and a sisterhood that you guys learn to depend on each other and to support each other. And that's a great way to do it. I had a very large team. I think we had like 800 people on it. And one of my direct reports came up with this great idea to just make up awards. And he made these things up off the top of his head. And he had 2 or 3 other people making these things up. And we would have a party. I think about every 3 months or so, we'd have a dinner. And we would bring them in for dinner and award, best employee or most improved or all sorts, and some crazy ones too that I don't remember. But the camaraderie coming out of those things was pretty amazing.
Right.
And it didn't, we could have given everybody a raise and it would have cost a whole lot more.
Yeah. So you're
And,
bonded before business.
that kind of thing goes a long, long way. And so I strongly encourage that.
Yeah. And thank you for your service too, Soldier. Appreciate it.
Sure. You're welcome. What, anything else? Any other questions, guys? Well, listen, thank you very much. If you have anything that comes up, by all means, ping me with an email. Sorry, I haven't met everybody, but hopefully will over the coming weeks. Okay.
Sounds great. Thank you, Dana. Appreciate you.
Okay. Bye-bye, guys.
Have a good day too.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.